We have Kelsey Hightower from Atlanta, Georgia. He calls himself a distinguished engineer at Google Cloud. He calls himself a minimalistic, so I'll keep this intro short. And we have many things to talk about, open source, DevRel. And if you don't know him, you should definitely check it out. He also has a page on Wikipedia, but on that page they say that you was born in 1980 or 1981. So the first question is, when were you born?
1981.
So we can fix that. So we are younger, so they're trying to make it older. So welcome, Kelsey, and how are you?
Good. So yeah, the fact is I was born in 1981.
Nice. So the thing that we will fix this bug on Wikipedia at the end. Perfect. I learned a lot. Yes. So, Kelsey, please introduce yourself. Let's start because honestly, it's hard to check everything you are doing. I tried, but you do so many things that I'm asking you directly now, like what you're currently doing, and then we start asking more about the past. We talk about, of course, open source and DevRel.
Yeah, I would say currently I'm working on a new open source project at Google with a team that's launching something. You'll hear more about that relatively soon. In addition to that, on the Google Cloud side, where I've been for about 7 years, I spent a lot more time on serverless technologies. So Cloud Run is an area where I spend a lot. For those unfamiliar with Cloud Run, it's a way to run containers with the serverless paradigm, right? So it scales to zero, pay per use. But the idea is that you should be able to run more than just functions. And so we support normal containers, normal runtime. So if you want to run Ruby on Rails, you can do that. If you want to scale to zero, you can do that. And some of the things that we're working on right now that are in probably beta or alpha for some people are the ability to run your applications more in the style of Kubernetes. So this is going to be things like a Kubernetes pod. So you can run that serverless container or multiple containers that share a lifecycle. There's things for mounting volumes, things for mounting secrets, health checks, right? All the things you like about Kubernetes, but in the serverless package. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how do we evolve in addition to Kubernetes to make it easier to run apps. And on the security side, a secure supply chain, right? That's a big focus for a lot of people to understand what's going into their apps and then producing enough metadata so that they can manage the full lifecycle. So that's all the current things, security and serverless are my big areas. And of course, still at Google Cloud, making sure that people can actually adopt the cloud.
Amazing, Kelsey. I really want to test whatever you are saying. So thank you so much. So please let's make an introduction because I wanted to know more like about your life, like how did you become a developer, how did you get involved, for example, in open source. So let's start with maybe talking about the open source, how did it impact your whole life, if this had an impact on your life.
Yeah, I got into this field around 1999, the year 2000. And so for open source for me, it was more about accessibility. So when I wanted to learn this stuff at that time, FreeBSD and Linux were very popular open source projects, the most accessible. You could download them. You could buy a magazine from the store and there will be a CD in the magazine and you can use that CD to install one of these open source operating systems. So if you were around in 1999 or starting your career, if you wanted to learn Unix, this is going to be the fastest way. So Solaris was still something you had to pay for. AIX only really worked with proprietary expensive machines that only organizations or businesses could afford. And so for the average person looking to get into tech, internet was not necessarily a place you would go to try to download this stuff. It would probably take forever. And so you would go and buy a magazine that had a copy of some distribution. And so that was my first intro into open source. And so in my mind, I took that term free software to literally mean free because I didn't have to pay for it. And that's not what open source means, but that's how I got into open source. And then from there, I think I learned a lot that method, got IT certifications, A+ certification, Linux Plus certification, and used that to start my career in mainly tech support. And so for a lot of the things that I was doing, I tried to use Linux to progress in my career. Web hosting was also new around that time. And so a lot of people would run, these web servers that were really based on open source technologies, tools like Plesk, web admin, all of these things were layered on top of Linux. And so for me, that was just the best way to become a system administrator, because Linux was the thing people were using to replace the old school Unix stuff. And I think the last piece here is getting involved with the community. So eventually I started to find meetups, right? A place you could go, give talks, and just learn from other people. And so that was my kind of entry point into this whole idea of giving public talks and just learning in public in general.
Nice, nice. So I'm old enough that I know some of these parts. So and yes, so it all started, let's say, with a magazine, let's say a magazine, a CD. But then, of course, there has been an evolution. And to be honest, I'm also interested into the speaking part, because I saw you still make like amazing videos, presentations. So how is this word that I'm kind of new of public speaking, just 6 months, almost 1 year, maybe be connected with open source? Because as you said, you participated in many events. So something more about the public speaking experience, and then we'll step into the DevRel, because I think we are going there.
I think it's super important people understand why people speak. Some people speak for purely marketing purposes. Nothing's wrong with that, right? Your company pays money to a conference so that they can speak about their products and services. Sometimes those talks are really good. There's no reason why that talk needs to be bad. And sometimes the talk looks like a misplaced advertisement, right? Like the person comes up, our product is great, you should use it, and here's what it looks like. And I think a lot of people don't want to see those, right? Of course, an organization would love to show off their product, but most people in the audience are not signing up to watch ads, even if it's from a sponsor that they like. They rather learn something. And so there are many reasons to speak. In the open source world, just think about it for a moment. Most people are contributing software to some place like GitHub. There is no way in the world that anyone would know what you're building just because you put it on GitHub. No one's just going to just browse GitHub one day and probably find your project. You're going to have to communicate to the real world. And so speaking is just a thing that humans have been doing for thousands of years to communicate all sorts of ideas, politics, anything. And open source is no different. So if you have an idea, right, there's a saying, some people have ideas and some ideas have people. And the only way that people will learn about your idea and decide if they want to participate in those ideas is for you to communicate with them. And I still think one of the best ways of communicating with people is being around them, right? Of course, you can make videos. Of course, you can make a blog post, but there's something magical that happens when you're in the same place with them. And so for me, going to a meetup was about that part. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what questions to ask. And so I just want to be in that room and see what happens. And so for me, in the early days of giving a talk, I think the first time I gave a talk, it was at Georgia State or Georgia Tech University. And I just wanted to prove myself, right? I'm watching other people speak. And the question I had was, can I do this too? Right. And so my first talk was at a Python meetup in Atlanta. And I gave a talk about Python versus Haskell. And we were talking about the details of list comprehensions, right? A lot of Python's syntax comes from languages like Haskell. And so I gave this presentation. It was purely for me to be able to prove myself that I was able to get in front of people and speak about technical topics. But eventually it became an avenue to share what I was working on. And so when I was contributing to open source projects like, tools like Virtual Env and pip, the package manager for Python, well, whatever I was contributing, I would go to the meetup and show people what we were working on, show people what was coming, and give them ideas on how they can help. And so it became a feedback loop. You do the work, and then you talk about it. And I think following that pattern, whether it was at a large conference, a small meetup, I think a lot of people gravitated to that style. Hey, here's the thing that I'm working on. Let me show it to you. And so that's why I got into public speaking as part of the feedback loop for the actual work.
Nice, Kelsey. I love that. And what you are saying, we can say that it's simple. Like you put it in simple words. Like if you want to have a communication with someone, you should speak about your projects, speaking about what you are doing. But then putting this in action is not the same thing sometimes, and then we don't know. Probably because there are some, some blockers, or maybe, I don't know, we feel that we are not good enough. For example, something like, am I good enough to jump on a stage and talk about this that I learned last week? So what do you think about this? Should someone be a public speaker just because they want to share their experience, or they should first become very expert into something and then apply to become a public speaker?
A professional speaker gets paid to speak, right? So that's someone pays you for your service. So if you want to be a professional speaker, you're going to have to come up with something that people want to pay for. And so there's an avenue for that. And a lot of times, some people will pay for your opinion. Some people will pay for your thoughts. Maybe you're an expert in some field and people want to hear from you. Maybe you're the one who created an open source project. Maybe you're a contributor to an open source project. And remember, all contributions counts, even documentation. And a lot of times people want to see these people and get their expert opinion on something. Sometimes they just want your opinion, right? Some people follow you for whatever reason, and you could be an expert in one domain like finance, and people may have a question about how a new piece of technology will impact your domain. And so there's a reason why people may want to hear from you. I think, though, in our everyday lives, there's always an opportunity for communicating with other people, even if it's an engineer that you're working with, right? So there's two people on the team. We split the work up. You take the front end, I take the back end. And now, if it's just two of us, I can use very simple communication tools, right? I can just show them my work. I can write a piece of documentation, or I can ask them to come over to my desktop and say, hey, I'm going to walk you through the API, why I designed it this way, and let you ask me questions, and I can explain it to you, right? That's just that one-on-one. Or you're building an API for another organization where there's going to be hundreds of people, right? We can leverage other tools. We can go to their all hands, we can go to their team meeting, and we can present to them the API and, of course, repeat the process. Then, of course, more formal events like a meetup, webinar, KubeCon, where there's thousands of people. To me, I treat them the same. When I'm thinking about content, I'm thinking about a person standing next to me that is interested in learning something. So my style tends to have very little slides. My style tends to say, if I'm working on something and it makes me excited, then I know that this is probably something that I feel that I would like to talk about and try to recreate that emotional response that I had. Like, I'm really excited about this. And if I can do the same thing on stage, then the people in the audience, well, they get excited too, right? Because it's the same feeling recaptured in a narrative. So I like to wrap a story around it. So I think people really do this really well with people they're comfortable with. So if it's someone you work with all the time, or maybe it's a friend, just notice how natural you are when you talk to them. You use simple words, you leverage your body language, you use intention, you use silence. But I think when people are uncomfortable, whether it's on a big stage, people they don't know, they tend to overdo it, right? They use complex words, too many pictures, too many slides, and then it can feel unnatural for everyone that's involved. And so I would say this is that everyone knows how to do public speaking because that's just what you do in general. And then getting comfortable speaking in larger audience in front of people you don't know, that's something that just takes time. And look, if you want to do it, you'll probably figure it out.
Yes, absolutely. And this remembers me like when someone does a driving license exam, they tend to know to drive too fast because they have to prove that they are good at driving. So probably with the opposite result, because probably the person just wants to see if you can drive slow or good. So it gives me this this vibe. And I don't know, yes, probably it's because, I don't know, we are anxious, we are more focused on what people could think about us rather than us communicating to what we learned, what we want to communicate. And this can be, as you said, on different levels. So yes, I totally agree with that. And this is a great tip if you want to get started with public speaking. So do less, maybe just try to be focused maybe on the message that you want to communicate. Nice. So Kelsey, can we say that you were doing the DevRel, so developer relations, even before becoming a developer advocate? Because also this sort of definition, it's kind of new even for me that I've been doing this for a couple of years now. So I asked this, I think, to about 200 people. So I'll try with you too, because I never had like one single definition. So what is DevRel for you, and what DevRel does mean for you from your point of view and your huge experience in this role?
Yeah, I mean, it's a world, it's a word. You know, kindness is a word, and different people have different views on what kindness means. And so depending on what your understanding is or what you want your outward projection to be is how you implement it. If I were to talk to a marketing department, they may say DevRel is a way to hire people who can relate to developers. And so in that case, it could be, let's make a video on YouTube in a way that a developer would like. So let's go and look at how videos are consumed by developers, and let's just copy that. We think developers like conferences, so let's just go speak at those. We think developers like blog posts, so let's write some of those. So in the copy and paste sense, DevRel will be that, right? What you see a lot of companies attempting to do. But I think if you think about just that combination of the words, like developer relations, you know, how do you relate to a person who's a developer? And some people would say it takes one to know one. And so people who have done the job before can understand the nuance in what they're saying. And I think in the world of DevRel, the live demo is so important. If you've never used the tool, then you are basically evangelizing, right? You're just saying, use it because I believe in it. Why do you believe in it? Because I'm being paid to believe in it, right? That could be a valid reason. So since I'm being paid well to believe in it, I need you to believe in it too, so we can keep the whole thing going. And that is a raw form of evangelism. And then advocacy is very different, in my opinion. Advocacy is going to be more around, we have this thing that we built. I have a thing that I've built. It's not usable by my target set of users. And these could also be paying customers. Why can't they use it? Who's going to advocate on their behalf? What bugs should be prioritized to be fixed? What should be on the actual roadmap, right? And so at the end of the day, there are a large group of consumers, whether they're users or paying customers, that happen to be developers. Those developers are now making independent decisions on the tools and products that they want to buy. So traditional marketing is not effective to that group of people. You can't just show them an ad and expect them to go and take an action. They need to see something way more authentic, right? When Nike wants to sell shoes, then they have to show those shoes being worn by professional athletes, right? If I see my favorite athlete wearing a certain set of shoes, I say, hey, those shoes must be good, because if the best professional is wearing them to do their job, they're going to work for me, even though I'm just playing at the local gym. And I think developers are the same way. I need to see it in action, and I need to understand that you understand what I'm trying to do. And if that's the case, then you have a way to effectively communicate. The unfortunate part about DevRel, though, people have used it to create another HR box, right? You join a company and they say, you are in DevRel. And then you may focus on the activities, right? I think a lot of people will say, oh, DevRel means creating videos, giving conference talks, getting likes and retweets. Those are activities. They may not result in any impact. And I think a lot of people in DevRel struggle with the difference between impact and activities. Impact is where you grow adoption, maybe increase revenue. And so I think the biggest challenge of that HR title is that, honestly, the set of techniques for communicating authentically with developers should be shared by everyone in the organization that is building something, and they should approach product development with empathy for that actual end user. So that's the way I think about DevRel. I think at a high level, it's a philosophy to communicate with authenticity to a developer community. And in terms of a role, you need to think about the differences between activities and impact.
Nice. I think this is one of the best definition that I heard so far, and I think that you are right about trying to create this authenticity line, let's say, connections with developers that usually they are sort of, let's say, allergic to this kind of ads. It can also backfire sometimes in some ways, because developers want to see things in action. They want to see things like, show me the code. They want to see what's behind that. So this is usually how.
If you have an open source project that you want people to use as an open source maintainer, and I've been that many times, you will wear a hat that does DevRel. You're going to have to write docs. You're going to have to create examples, and you're going to have to be able to have a feedback loop to the people you want to use the open source project. And so I think it's a discipline that I think a lot of people may not understand, but they probably are responsible for doing.
Thank you, Kelsey. We are having a lot of questions, so if that's okay for you, I will start with some of them because they are piling up. So let's start to get some of them. So Madhu asks, which is the best DX developer experience you've seen so far, and why is it the best?
The best developer experience you never see because it's the best. It's hidden. If it's in my way, then it cannot be the best if I have to think about it. This is why people like key bindings. I can choose a combination of keys and commit to muscle memory, and it fades away. I don't even think about it. I want to open an application, Shift, Apple, A, and it brings up my applications. It's a hidden feature. There is no UI. There is no pop-up. That's one of the best developer experiences in the world. And this is when developers that have ever used something like Emacs or Vim, and when they go to a different IDE, what is the first thing they try to do? They try to get their key bindings back, right? Because they've turned their workflow into a set of key presses to speed things up. Think about autocomplete in the IDE. I'm typing, I hit period on a function, and I hit tab, and it auto-completes the rest of the work. If you've never used tools like GitHub's Copilot, for example, and I've used it the other day to write some unit tests, right? I wrote my code, then I opened up a test file, and I just started typing tab, and it started writing unit tests for some of my other functions. That's a very powerful developer experience because it's so transparent. It's completely out of the way. And I think sometimes we over-index on like fancy UIs, right? Like day one experiences, right? You're new to, let's say, a cloud platform. And you go to the cloud platform and there's lots of options, right? You want to connect, you may want to create a database. Now, typically there's a form where you have to fill out all the database things. What version of MongoDB do you want? How big is the instance size? What region? How much do you want to cost? These are lots of questions that are basically friction for the developer. And so we try to have sane defaults to make it easy, or you may think about a wizard that makes it easy to click through. But I think those are just day one kind of sugar-coated things that doesn't necessarily represent a long-term great developer experience. So to me, the best developer experience is the one you can't see.
Amazing. I love this one. Perfect. Okay. Nice. Let's go with this one by Pradumna about commercial open source software. So, which are your thoughts about this? And I see a lot of companies join the CNCF landscape.
I did a whole podcast with a guy named Joseph Jacks, not a podcast, but a Twitter space. So it's still on my profile. If you go to Twitter, you'll see it. And we did a whole session with Joseph Jacks. He was one of the people, him, I, and another person, Patrick Riley. We started KubeCon together before the CNCF existed. And he's a venture capitalist that invests solely in these open source companies. And we went into a lot of detail about why he's chosen that path. My personal opinion here is that if depending on the type of software you're building, a lot of people won't use that software unless it's open source, right? When it comes to like computing platforms, programming languages, maybe it's a specialized programming language, maybe some people would pay to use it. But in general, I think things that are mostly general purpose at this point, there's so much competition in the open source space. There's so much innovation in the open source space. For many organizations, you're almost kind of forced to start. And I think with open source being your starting point, it gives you a chance to really think through your go-to-market strategy, build that viable product, and then attract a bunch of community developers that are willing to exercise your product and be willing to adopt it before you find the perfect price, the perfect entry point, maybe even before it's completely finished. And so it becomes a great, what we call top of the funnel, right? You want to bring people in, figure out what works well from them, and then it gives you an ability to decide what things should be commercial. Maybe things like integrating with enterprise systems, like Active Directory for login, most people in the open source world are not using Active Directory as a paid for authentication mechanism. So it's okay if you decide to charge for that as a layer on top. I think that's fair. So when it comes to like the CNCF landscape, there's many reasons to do it. Some companies, some potential customers, they want to see that you have a really good governance model. They want to know that if you go out of business, remember, not every startup is going to make it. And so what happens if your startup goes away or the current maintainers choose not to work on it anymore? Well, if I'm a large institution, I expect this technology to work for decades. And so we need to know that it's going to be around longer than the maintainers will be around. And so I think CNCF and other foundations, they provide a landing place for governance, things like IP. Can you use the trademark? And also there's an opportunity for people to be very clear about their governance model and how they choose to collaborate long-term. So to me, commercial open source should be very little difference than normal open source, but we just got to have a community agreement on what things do I have to pay for, and will you stop me from competing with you on the open side, right? And no one wants to see that. We've seen examples over time where some companies will say, you can't contribute to open source what we plan to sell on the commercial side. And whenever that happens, I think you create a little bit of tension, but as long as you clear, I think it's fair.
Yeah, I agree with that. There is nothing wrong with trying to get some. Of course, it makes sense, and as you said, also you should always be clear about our intentions. I think this is what otherwise you will have, I think, some bad moments trying to explain things after. I think you should, if you make things clear since the beginning, I think that it's you're good to go. Thank you so much, Kelsey. And we have also many questions about the DevRel side. So now let's get some of them, if that's okay for you. But of course, we are not done yet with open source. You are never done, basically, with open source. So you were talking about your experience in meetups, but now I would like to ask you, like, how has been like your first experience or your first experiences in DevRel? Because I think that many people here, they want to get started in some ways. As I said, I'm also just trying to unlock DevRel. It's the name of a series when I talk openly and about my own personal experience. And so from your point of view, what is the best way to start, and about your, basically based on your especially first experiences?
I'm going to give people my experience. Not that I'm authoritative for anyone else, so make sure we put that caveat there. I want to be very clear with people. I don't know if I would do DevRel as my first job, knowing what I know. I didn't do DevRel until 13 years in the industry. I've done tech support, system administration. I worked inside of the data centers. I've closed data centers to move them to the cloud. I worked on open source projects like Puppet. I worked at Puppet. I worked on Python. I wrote code in Ruby, Golang. I've contributed some small fixes to the Go programming language. I worked in enterprises that had to just use the technology, get it into production, and then be responsible for what happens in production. And so you take this combination of 13 years and you join Google Cloud. And remember, when I joined Google Cloud, it was very interesting. At that time, I was a contributor to Kubernetes. I'm coming from CoreOS, where I helped create things like the CNI plugin interface. And at that time, I'm doing a lot of the work and also speaking about the work in parallel. And a little people know this, that I was also the product manager before leaving CoreOS. So when I joined Google, I was joining Google for flexibility. And one of the most flexible roles at Google at that time was developer relations. I had never done it before. And so for me, I looked at that and says, okay, I do not want to be put in a box. At that time, 7 years ago, all I knew about DevRel was people who focus on creating activities, blog posts, talks, social media. That's not what I do. I'm not interested in that as a full-time job. I actually like customers. I like revenue. I like business. I like understanding how to make a product so good that people want to pay for it. I also know that you actually have to build the actual product and you have to prioritize what to build. So when you're working with the engineering team, I've been a VP of engineering before. I've been a team lead before. I've been an engineer before. And I know that you have to make a lot of decisions across multiple teams to land on something in the right order that keeps your customers happy. And so when I came to DevRel at Google, the role had to include the ability to do all of those things. So for me, when I joined, I already had a connection with the Kubernetes team at Google because I used to contribute to open source. And so I knew that project well, all the way down to the source code level. So I also knew the opportunities from a product perspective, because when I was at CoreOS, we had to turn open source Kubernetes into a business model that we can actually sell software to actual customers. And so joining Google, I had the flexibility, and actually I was very lucky. When I joined Google, actually I said no 3 times because I was going to go work at NASA. I was going to go work at JPL in Pasadena, and this is the team responsible for the Mars rover and the landing on Mars and all kind of other projects. But I wanted to do something like that because I thought the impact was much clearer. But Google was very nice and said, listen, you can have free range as long as you make impact. And so I was able to make impact, which I think is very smart for anyone doing DevRel. It starts with the work. Figure out what the work is. How do you actually figure out what the work is? Go look at what the profit and loss statement is. The thing you work on, does it make any money? Do customers like it? If it's not meeting those monetary goals, why? Is it not usable? Does it not have the right integrations? Your job is to go find out. How do you find out? You go spend time with actual customers. You sit with them, you whiteboard with them, you listen deeply, and then you take all the noise and you translate it into priority. And so for me, that's learning how to use the tools of the people who build the products at your organization. That means writing product docs. Hey, here's what the feature should look like. Here are the critical user journeys. Kelsey, why are you making this up? Nope, this is what customers are doing. I can introduce you to them. Here's what they're currently doing, and here's what our opportunity is. And then you go from that into actual implementation. Sometimes you can contribute code. Maybe you just build a prototype. But at the end of the day, your job is to nudge the product engineering organization in a certain direction that results in usable features for your customers. That's the trifecta. Rinse and repeat to grow adoption for your products. The last thing is, once you've done the first two, now you have something to talk about. And then the things you talk about become very interesting. Here is why we built the product the way we built it. Here's the general problem. Here's what we believe is a general solution. And maybe you can go into the technical implementation details if that's what your audience wants. Maybe you can give them examples of how people are running it in production if that's what your audience wants. But those are trailing activities that you do after the work. The thing that helped me most, though, is having the 13 years of prior experience. Because now I don't just talk about the product, I can talk about the reality of adopting that product over time. So now what do I think after not being in DevRel anymore? So I got out of DevRel 2 years ago. I think most people should understand what this discipline is and leverage it. If you're a PM, you got to learn how to communicate and write really clear user journeys about how your product will be used, how it's currently being used, and how to improve it and set priorities around that. If you're an engineer, the reason why I started the empathetic engineering program at Google is because I wanted engineers to know what it's like to use their product from a customer perspective so they can approach their work with empathy. How will people actually authenticate to your product? Is it compatible with the market is doing? And so I think now that I go back and revisit that experience, I think everyone can learn something from it, but I think it's all about what you bring to the table. Remember, I keep going back to it, impact versus activities, because they're not always the same thing.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. I think that basically what you are communicating is that you should be patient, and I like this approach, which is, let's say, bottom up. So you build up from the basics. You start from, as you say, like start from building, and then I think in that case you can really understand and put in communication the company, the customers, the users. Because if you don't have an understanding if you're just, let's say, an evangelist, which is nothing wrong with that, but like if you really want to go and dive deep into this process, you should
I want to be
understand
very clear. I like impact. I like looking at a product and seeing where I actually help the product change in some way. For me personally, as an engineer, I need to understand how the product changed. You can write the code to change the product. That's one way. You can inspire people to change the product. That's another way. That's a very powerful tool that people in DevRel have. They can change the product without writing any code. That's a beautiful skill set. There's also another great skill set that you can go into a product, learn the product, and teach it to others. That's a wonderful skill. And I think, honestly, the number of people that are still coming into our world, the number of people that are just starting out, they really need someone to break those things down, make them easier to understand. That's a superpower. So look, there's been lots of things that I've taught people on that I only learned 2 days prior, right? Because I was able to take background knowledge, apply it to something new, and then bring people to a better understanding with context. And that's okay too. So it's not an either or. I think they're just different skill sets. But I think for me, having previous experience allowed me to go a little deeper and make a slightly different type of impact.
Yes, absolutely. So having this previous experience can really help then when you want to do at some point maybe in your career. Never see some people, they think that like DevRel is like the normal evolution from development, like you all start from developers and we all end up being developer advocates, but don't think that this is like a must of career.
I mean, I think it opens up for you. Like, think about professional sports. A couple decades ago, I think they started to realize that there are people who are really good at commentating on live sports. These people are great at it. But there's a nice element that you can bring to that. It doesn't automatically make them good at speaking and commentating on live games. But when you bring an ex-player into the mix, you get into the deeper psychology. It's like, why did that player do that? And as an ex-player, it's like the reason why we do things like that is because of this. So what you're seeing is this. And so when you start to augment those things, and I think athletes are understanding there is valuable and getting really good at communicating skills. Some professional athletes are going to make more money communicating about sports than they ever did playing sports. So I think as developers, one thing to take away from this is DevRel is an avenue that you can progress into. So is QA, so is system administration, and so is some other discipline like becoming a lawyer and using your tech skills to make you a better lawyer. These are all outlets for this core skill set that you have. But I think when people master communication and they love connecting with people, there's this natural tendency to flow towards this new exciting field called DevRel that allows us to take all of our experience and magnify it across the world. I think that is valuable. So now we finally have a name for describing what that is.
Yes, absolutely. I think I heard this word 3 years ago, not more than 4. So yes, it's a kind of new, and we're still trying to understand how to get started. And for example, what Vishek is asking here, I see this question very often. I also get this very often. So the challenges, like, because I think that many people think that like being DevRel, it's easy. Like you just stay a bit of time on Twitter, then you make a couple of live streams, and then you are done, and you can call your day. So if you're a DevRel, already know that it's not that. But like I would like to ask you directly, which are some common challenges that you faced in DevRel, and how did you overcome them, if you managed to overcome them, of course. You are muted.
Yeah, after a bit of self-reflection, I realized that a lot of people have trouble appreciating skills they don't have. They don't understand what it takes to acquire those skills. They may watch someone do it effortlessly and believe that they can just do it too. And that's just a human problem in general. And so there are a lot of people who are in the tech industry that have zero communication skills. They're really terrible. They're really smart, but they have no way of communicating what they're doing and why anyone else should do it too. And so for them, they've gotten really far in their careers without the ability to communicate. And so for them, they believe that communication skills are not required to be successful. Now, unfortunately for that person, they don't understand how much of their career has been limited by not being able to communicate. So they have no frame of reference. And so imagine when people who watch people do these things, like all you do is tweet. Well, because they believe that writing a tweet is easy, right? Because they can tweet too, right? My shoes are red. And then they get 1 million likes on Twitter. And they're like, see, I can do it. So what's the difference between me and you, right? And so that is one way to frame this kind of discussion. One of the challenges I had, and it was amazing because people thought I was just someone who was just talking at a conference based on a deck or demo that someone else built for me. And so I'm speaking at a conference and I'm talking about Kubernetes and the low-level details on how it's implemented. And someone just asked this question, assuming that I couldn't answer it. And they were like, what happens if the consistency model of Kubernetes were to get messed up? Wouldn't the whole system break? And I was like, well, that's not how etcd works. We talked a little bit about CAP theorem, and I showed them that etcd leans towards consistency. And this is some computer scientist, and he was debating the CAP theorem. I was like, listen, you only have certain rules. CAP theorem is good enough to explain the situation. If we can't have consistency in Kubernetes, then the system stops. And he didn't believe me. So I said, all right, let me show you. If you turn etcd off, what will happen? It won't accept any changes. You're going to get an error because it's leaning towards consistency. So we sacrifice availability because there's a network partition. There you go. This is in simple terms. Now I'm going to show you what happens when we bring it back, but don't have a quorum. But in that case, I found that throughout the years, before people understood my background, I had to explain to them that I'm a contributor to Kubernetes. I have commit access. I wrote the book you're reading. Look at the bottom. I'm the author. That's my name. And so people would get confused that they didn't understand that just because you're speaking on a stage, that you don't know how to actually write code. And I remember there were people that using my open source libraries. It's like, you see that library, that import statement? That's from my GitHub repository. Just call git blame and you'll see that I wrote that code. But it's funny how people may not even do research. So I think a lot of times in DevRel, there's a bias that we're marketing people. And again, there's nothing wrong with marketing people, but they believe that a lot of people that are really good at communication must be bad at actually writing software, or that software somehow is a superior skill than communicating. And if you had a superior coding skill, then you probably wouldn't want to talk. And so I had to always overcome that for a little while, especially if someone put DevRel in the title. Imagine this. I'm an executive at Google. Imagine going into an executive meeting and your title says DevRel. Think about what that executive would have in their mind. This person doesn't understand business. This person doesn't understand my revenue needs. This person doesn't understand that I don't care about how Kubernetes is implemented. I need to understand how I can use Kubernetes to move my business forward. And so in that executive briefing, I have to reset that mindset quickly. You only get 30 seconds. And so you have to let them understand that, hey, I understand the business, so we got to start high. So in DevRel, we tend to focus on hello world. We show people how things work. But in the business world, we have to focus on hello revenue. So one of the challenges is being able to make that switch. And then in a minute, you may have to go and explain to the CTO how it works, and then bounce back to the chief executive officer and explain to them how this may impact their business, because that's where the technology landscape is going, and they should choose to adopt it now. So I think those are the challenges, but it's always been fun. And the last thing I'll say here is we have so many great examples now of good engineers that are moving towards DevRel, showing people that this is a valid path for people with strong engineering skills to also show off their communication skills. So I see less of it more, but I think there's a lot of bias where people will sometimes try to shame people who are very popular on YouTube or Twitter and claim that they are not real engineers. And I think that is just literally pretty sad to see, because it just isn't true all the time.
Thank you so much, ragazzi. This was emotional because I also feel this sometimes. Yes, this happens, and I agree with what you said. That sometimes when people are judging, they don't know what is behind that. To make an analogy with what you were saying before, it's like when someone is sitting on a couch and they see, I don't know, someone who can score a goal. Say, "Oh, I could score that goal easily." So something like that. So. Amazing. Okay, nice. Thank you. I'm really enjoying this. We already crossed the 45 minutes. It seems like 10 minutes to me, but yes. So thank you so much for staying. And Kelsey, tell me when you have to go. Otherwise, I'll keep you, kidnap you for the next 2 or 3 hours. So let's keep with a couple of more questions. So I also get this very often, like the metric, like are DevRel currently working? Are they currently doing something? So how can we have a metric to understand, or maybe maybe let's say that even the company, like they don't want to annoy you. That's like, are you doing good? Or they have a sensation that you're doing good. But like sometimes even for me, like if I want to control if I'm doing good, like I don't know, if you lift weights, you have a number. You say, okay, so I'm lifting 12, I'm lifting 20, so I'm doing good. With the DevRel, it's not that easy because there are not like numbers of the weights that you are lifting. So how can we measure how much weight we are lifting in the DevRel? Which are the best KPI or way to measure what we are doing?
There's probably a good answer somewhere. All I have is my opinion. My opinion is that in business, whether you like it or not, let's talk about business. I don't work for free. I require payment, right? I don't work for free. I require payment. It's that simple. Businesses tend to exist to generate money from the things that they choose to build. That's also pretty straightforward. We want businesses to do that ethically, of course, correct? And if you choose to join a company on that mission, you expect payment. And in order to pay you, the thing that they're building must be something that people want to pay for. Very simple formula. Of course, we want to do things ethically. Now, in the open source community, it's a little different. A lot of times we may end up volunteering our time, and a lot of times the maintainers will hide the burden of managing that code that we commit and we get to disappear, but that maintainer must stick around for the long term to ensure that that code is maintained and is secure going forward. So what's the metric? Well, if it's an open source project, your metric is that you may just want to share it with the world. And I've created projects before where I just say, I'm going to put it on GitHub and that's it. There will be no maintenance. I'm not looking at it and I'm not fixing any bugs. And I expect no payment from you either. If you don't like it, you can fork it and you can do whatever you want with it. That's the only requirement, is that I wanted to share. That's the only outcome. Now, let's say I wanted to have a popular open source project and I want the number of GitHub stars to grow. So then you may wake up every morning and you look at your number of GitHub stars, right? And you say, I want more stars. So what would you do to get more stars? You would probably tweet about your GitHub project, right? You would say, hey, check out my GitHub project. And then you would say something like, and if you like it, please give it a star. There has to be a call to action. And so then you wake up the next morning and you have more GitHub stars than before. And so you know something is working. When I give a tutorial at the end, I'll say, please like this GitHub repository. And if you find something that works, whether it's tweeting, making videos, or streaming on Twitch, either way, you found a way to grow the number of GitHub stars. So you're going to keep doing those activities. Why are you doing those activities? Because they're having the impact that you set out to measure, which is GitHub stars. Now, in this case, you still have no money. You still may be the only person fixing all the bugs, doing all the work. But if all you care about are GitHub stars, then that's what you're going to get. So now let's apply it to business. So instead of GitHub stars, the business wants money, actual money. So now think about the activities you need to do in order to get money now. So as a person doing DevRel, your manager could say, we want more people to read this blog post. So what do we do in DevRel when someone tells us that? We do all of these tricks to make people read the blog posts. We put all the keywords, we do all the SEO stuff. We go on Twitter and say, please read my blog post. And then you get a lot of people that read your blog post and no money. Wow. People are still going to be mad at you because if I'm the business and I find out that all you're doing is writing blog posts and you tell me, hey, look at this chart. The number of people reading our blog posts has gone up. And if I'm the business and I have to pay you, I say, but we're not making any money. We care about money. You care about blog post views. We have a disconnect, right? We hear that sometimes. There's a misalignment. You want blog post kicks, right? And some people could say, go scan badges at a booth, right? So before you go to the conference, they say, hey, you can go, but we want you to scan badges. And you say, well, how many do you want? They say, well, if it's 10,000 people at the conference, we want 2,000 scans of badges. So what are you going to do? You're going to be very clever. And you're going to run around and you're going to scan 2,000 badges so you can go watch some talks now, right? That's what you're going to optimize for. That's just how humans work. So when people ask me, what's the best metrics? Let's not fool ourselves. If you work at a company that must make money to survive and to pay you, by the way, there's really only one metric. Are your activities having an impact on the money? If the answer is yes, then to me, in my personal experience, DevRel gets way easier. So if you say, I went to a conference and I got 3 new customers that are each paying us $100 million, I promise you, no one's going to ask you about any other metrics. They don't care how many badges you scanned. They don't care if you've never written a blog post. You bring money in the door. There's no need for any other metric, right? Like your example about lifting weights. I don't care how much weights you're lifting. If you go to the Olympics and get the gold medal, all the other stuff doesn't matter to me. You got the gold medal. And then if I interview you, you say, I don't even lift weights at home. I just come to the Olympics, I lift, I win, I go back home. It's like, damn, I don't care about these other metrics anymore, do I? So I think for DevRel, we got to ask ourselves, are we actually making an impact? Look, I'm not telling you to go tell your manager that all their, KPIs are broken, right? I think a lot of times we put in these things because we're unsure. When we're unsure, we start putting out metrics. I've seen a lot of people in DevRel make a fatal mistake. They have no strategy. If someone comes to say, why are you doing what you're doing? I don't know. I'm in DevRel. I go to a conference. I write blog. I do Twitter. What else should I be doing? So now you've set the stage for someone to tell you what to do. They'll tell you, okay, if that's what you believe you're doing, then I'm going to make up some KPIs around that. But when you have a strategy, you say, listen, I'm in DevRel and I understand our customers. We have these products. Our current adoption is this. We have 5,000 users, and I think we can get to 7,500 users. The way we're going to get to 7,500 or 2,500 new paying customers, I believe these activities are necessary. If I'm right, we should see adoption grow at this. That's my part. And I need marketing to do this part, and I need engineering to do this part. If all those things come together, that's my strategy. People will say that is a wonderful strategy. And then look, the KPIs will help for you tell you what's working. So if you write a blog post, are people even reading it? That's good to know. I'm not saying it's unnecessary. It's good to know. But boy, I'd rather have revenue over blog views.
Someone say the truth has been spoken, Radumna. Yes, and I think that here you're showing your experience, and I like this approach. I don't know if this is applicable for all the companies. For example, the companies I'm currently working on, it's a free product, so I don't know if these things make things harder or easier. I don't know, maybe both of them, but yes, I think that this is a simple but also hard approach, because it basically, I like what you said at some point, like about the disconnection between like your goals, I don't know, we can turn this into like, of course, blog views or video views. It's great to have views for everyone. It's like, oh, we made TikTok 200,000 of views. Nice, everyone is happy. But of course, this is not enough. This should be turned into users. Sometimes, I don't know, it can be hard to understand your specific impact, because you are not the only one working in a company. There is the product. Maybe the product is just good and you are bad, or maybe the opposite. You are very good, the product is bad, but you are so good that you, I don't know, you managed to convince someone, I don't know, because you have a smiley face. So this might be. So yes, I'll reflect. I will watch this again, I think, after, but I'll try to understand. But I like this idea of like trying to work really hand in hand with your team, not stay disconnected like in an ISO and you just create videos just to make views. So this is for sure something which is very, very important, as yes. So Kelsey, thank you so much for your great words, and really looking forward. Maybe one day we will meet. Also, I don't know, I'm trying to go in some DevOps conferences on somewhere. I'll be in Atlanta, but you'll not be there this year, be in Denver. So I'm coming to the US sometimes. So really looking forward for that. Maybe we have one very last one. It was about open source. Like, what do you think it might be the future of open source? I can't find it, but it's something. Yeah, this one. How has the use of open source evolved over the years, and what do you see can be its future potential? Because I'm old enough that like 20 years ago it was not so much present as now. It seems like something's different now. Everyone is advocating for open source. So what do you think it evolved, and how can be the future potential?
They say that the future is easy to predict if you're working on it. And I was coming back from an engineering offsite, and I'm on a flight, and a guy saw my Google Cloud backpack, and they asked me what I did. And I told them that I'm an engineer at Google Cloud, and I'm working on all these serverless things and whatever. And I asked them, what did they do? And this person says they help business leaders understand how to tap into global talent all over the world. And he said, look around the airplane. Me and this gentleman were sitting in first class. And he said, look at the plane. It's nice, right? Brand new airplane. We have fast internet, and they were serving us food on the plane. He says, this is a pretty nice plane. But unfortunately, in aviation, there are not a lot of countries and people around the world that contribute to the advancement of aviation. So this plane in aviation in general has only been built by a very small subset of society globally. And so this is as far as we have. So this is not the best that humanity can do. Aviation is all we see now is what the best that a small subset of humanity can do. When it comes to software, I think open source has demonstrated what happens when you have a large collection of people come together and have alignment on what they want the future to be. And so you can just create any project that you want. There is no company that has to give you permission. You don't even have to have an aim to make money. You can do whatever you want, and you can attract people to collaborate with you from anywhere in the world. So from a foundation standpoint, we have licenses. You can pick one. There's many. And you can choose how other people get to leverage the work that you all come together and do. So we have this foundation. We have a legal construct. We have collaboration tools like GitLab and GitHub. And I think what that does means it says any group of people anywhere in the world, we have all of these tools to come together, whether it's Discord or Twitter, to come communicate, collaborate, and build whatever we want. So to me, that foundation of human collaboration, that means that I think people will work on bigger problems. So in the early days, we were basically competing with commercial software like operating systems and programming languages, right? And so, hey, we have a use case. We want to have people who want to see a free and open alternative to commercial software. Great. I think the last couple of decades, you saw a lot of that. But what happens when people who want to solve healthcare, people who want to make education better, who want to automate legal defense for people that cannot afford a lawyer, people who want to tackle finance, people who want to tackle any type of problem. So when you bring those different people together and then they get to try to solve that new problem with code, then I think what you're going to find out is that software can be applied to other domains and then leverage that software to either automate or improve or democratize, right? Give more people access to things that were price restrictive before. And so I think the future is going to be more collaboration from people who are just not developers or software people. You're going to have software people combined with domain experts to come together and then open source the solution. I think that is 100% the future. So the future will be defined by people. Whatever problems that people are working on, that will define the future. And open source, I think, is still one of the best models for people to come to collaborate together and then share the results with the rest of the world. That's the way I think about open source. It's not open source code just to write source code. No, people coming together to solve a problem that can happily and somewhat be solved by leveraging software as part of the solution.
Nice, amazing. So basically, it will be focused more on the open rather than the source. So the open part will be probably the most relevant part in the future. Yes, I really love that. And yes, so Kelsey, thank you so much. I hope that we will collaborate in the future. I really wish you best of luck with whatever you are currently working on. I didn't even ask, I don't know which are your projects. And of course, follow him, but he doesn't read my promo, of course. But before we close, do we want to say like which are your plans? Did you make plans for 2023?
My plans is to keep doing what I've been doing. I've been fairly successful and I never stop learning. So the plan is to keep learning. And look, if you have one big takeaway, when we talk about open source and DevRel, activities and impact are not always the same thing. And just try to figure out how to align yourself strategically to get these things to move closer. And if you focus on the impact, then I think the right activities reveal themselves.
Nice. Thank you so much, Kelsey. I see that you also are kind of active on Twitter Spaces lately, so maybe we can jump because I'm kind of active there, kind of addicted to Twitter Spaces. So maybe we can make one in the future, and I'll jump in one of yours in the future. Thank you so much, and yeah, best of luck for everything. Remember to follow him, of course, and yes. Bye, everyone. Thank you much, everyone. We got so many compliments that I really can't list them all, but trust me, like someone is saying this is one of the best, if not the best episode so far. So for sure, one of the best episodes. And thank you. Thank you so much for your communication, your authenticity. Keep doing what you're doing, Kelsey, because you're really, I don't know, like a mentor, like someone I really look up to, you know, on the way you communicate and you manage to communicate over years of experience, talking literally with everyone and so many things. And yes, perfect, Kelsey. Awesome. I'm done. I'm happy. You made me happy. You made my day by making this short, not really short, 1 hour. I kept you here. So I think this is enough for today. Thank you so much. And yes, bye bye, everyone. Bye bye.